So hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and today I'm going to show you 3 builds that will essentially cover all the melee weapons in Warframe. These are builds that I use on 99% of my melee weapons, and they are the standard crit build, a status build, and a raw damage build. I'm not saying these builds are perfect and you should never run anything else. What I am saying though is these builds are a good starting point and the weapons you put them on will be effective with them. The way I personally work with these builds is when I get a new melee weapon, I will take a look at the stats and see if it has high status chance, high critical strike chance, or just raw damage without high status or critical strike chance, and I will pick one of these 3 basic builds. And as I slowly get familiar with the weapon and I spot some downsides like slow attack speed or short range, I will switch mods accordingly. So let's take a look at these 3 builds, and the first one we're going to take a look at is the standard crit build. So we're going to start off by adding a stance that matches the polarity so we get more mod capacity, and we're going to add blood rush and body count. This adds a lot of damage and also a lot of critical strike chance. Then we're going to add pressure point for even more damage, and we're going to add berserker for attack speed. And we chose Berserker because it's fairly cheap and it's going to give you a lot of attack speed as you start critting. Then we're going to add 2 elemental mods, and for me most of the time it's going to be Shocking Touch and Fever Strike for corrosive damage. And we're going to finish it off with True Steel for more critical strike chance and Organ Shatter for higher critical damage multiplier. So this is the first build that I will use when I get a new crit weapon. The one mod that I tend to swap out is True Steel, and that's all based on the raw critical strike chance of the weapon. Basically, if the weapon can reach full-on red crit territory with Blood Rush without True Steel, I will swap it out for something else, and it can be a utility mod like Reach, it can be Fury if the weapon is really slow, or it can even be another elemental mod if I want the weapon to do more damage. Now personally, I use this build on weapons that have critical strike chance of at least 10%. Anything lower than that, and I would rather go for either the raw damage build or even the status build if the weapon has enough status chance. Overall, this is by far the strongest build out of the 3 builds I'm going to show you today, and it's probably the most damaging melee build in the entire game. Now, let's take a look at the status build. So the status build starts off once again with a stance that matches the polarity, so we have more mod capacity, and we're going to add pressure point because even though we want to spread around status procs, we still want to do damage, and that's also the reason why we have body count, because with body count and high combo counters, you can triple or even quadruple the amount of damage you do with your melee weapon, which is awesome. Then we're going to add Reach or Primed Reach to increase the range of our melee weapon, and this will help us spread status in a much larger area. And then we're going to add Fury or Primed Fury to increase our attack speed so we can proc status more often. And finally, as you can see, we have all 4 of the dual stat mods, so we're using Vicious Frost for the cold damage, Volcanic Edge for the heat damage, Virulent Scourge for toxin damage, and Voltaic Strike for electricity. And of course, each one of these mods is going to give us a nice boost to status chance. Now, not each status-based melee weapon needs all 4 of these dual stat mods to reach 100% status chance. And if that's the case, what I like to do is simply take out one of the dual stat mods and just replace it with a regular elemental mod. Now personally, I like to use this build on melee weapons that have at least 20% status chance because I don't think 15 or even 10% status chance is enough for a status build. And it works much better on melee weapons that don't deal any physical damage, so they don't have any slash damage, impact damage, or puncture damage. They just have elemental damage as base, like the Prova Stun Stick, which does electricity damage. Now that doesn't mean that weapons that deal physical damage are bad for status builds. It just means that you will have a wider variety of procs that can happen with each swing, and the game tends to favor the physical procs over the elemental procs. And let's take a look at the final build, the raw damage build. The build I like to use on a weapon that either doesn't have a lot of critical strike chance or status chance, or on a weapon that I just want to use for quick melee attacks. And this once again starts off with a stance that matches the polarity, like High Noon in this case for the Redeemer, to get more mod capacity. Then we're going to add Pressure Point or Primed Pressure Point for straight up raw damage, Jagged Edge or any of the other 2 physical damage mods to amplify the highest physical damage the weapon does, Spoiled Strike for even more damage, and Primed Fury to offset Spoiled Strike and give us a little bit of attack speed. After that, we're going to add Body Count because once again, Body Count is amazing, and with high enough combo you can triple or even quadruple the damage you deal with the weapon. And we're going to finish it off with 3 elemental mods, and for me most of the time it's Shocking Touch and Fever Strike for corrosive damage and Molten Impact for heat damage. And this is the setup I use if I want to go full melee with a weapon that doesn't have high enough critical strike chance for the crit build or status chance for the status build. However, if I want to use the weapon for quick attacks only, I'm gonna swap out body count because we don't need it anymore on this, and I'm gonna put on reach or some other utility mod or even another damage mod. Now, there aren't too many weapons that I would run this build on rather than the status or the crit build, because nowadays we have a lot of melee weapons that have decent critical strike chance or decent status chance. But there are a few weapons that don't fit either into the crit or the status category. This is by far the weakest build out of the three. It's not gonna do as much damage as the crit build, and while it will do more damage than the status build, it's not gonna spread around any status procs. And that's pretty much it, so I hope you've enjoyed the video. I thank you very much for watching, as always, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.